Let's go ahead and have audience mics off and we'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you so much for everyone's participation. We're a new club, we're getting started, but we're really excited to offer information to everybody. Especially we're really grateful to Coltin for coming on, allowing us to keep this a free platform. So we're really excited. We also appreciate your patience. This is our first webinar, so we may have some kinks, some technical things we need to learn. If you have feedback after this of ways we can improve, definitely send an email to stockhorseireland@gmail.com and we'll all consider that going forward. Yeah, and we're looking forward to it. We'll have our Q&A after. To promo, so our membership is currently open. Our awards program is currently open for stock course owners. And next month, we will be having a webinar with APHA judge Mark Coolwine. And we'll be talking a little bit more about, like, from a judge's perspective, like what makes one horse better than another horse kind of things. We are going to do a spot prize giveaway at the top and at the end here. So I will randomly draw a name. If you love hearing from Coltin and you want to do any sort of video lesson, he is available for that. And we'll tag him on a Facebook post after this, and you can just get in touch with him via Facebook Messenger. And really quickly, I'll introduce you to your Stock Horse Ireland leadership. So Krista Brown, I am the chairman of Stock Horse Ireland. We also have Maddie Munns. Do you prefer Munns Park or Maddie? I don't know.
Munns is fine. I don't really care. I don't even know what it is legally.
Lovely. We've got Maddie. We've got Sorsha here. Thank you. And then we've got Anna Maria with her daughter Hazel there, but Anna Maria is the only one on leadership. Sorry, Hazel. Oh, we've got balloons.
Offspring. I've got Offspring here as well.
Oh, very good. Neve's here as well in the background. Beautiful. Okay, very good. So really quick, I'm gonna pull the prize. Don't look at my room. Okay. I have a hat donated by Signature Stitchworks, and this one's gonna go to Allison. If you want to send us your mail details to stockhorseireland@gmail after, then we'll get this mailed out to you. Okay. Coltin, I'm going to hand this off to you. We're excited to hear from you.
All right, perfect. Well, my name is Coltin Crystal, as you've seen on all the Facebook posts. I'm an AQHA professional horseman. I've been training professionally for 8 years. I'm a 4th generation horse trainer. As we talked about before we kind of got started, if you weren't here, my family comes from a ranching, racing, rodeo background, and I was the first person that decided to go slow and do some of the hunter and eventing type things. So I kind of built my career that way. I've done just about a little bit of everything. Taught a lot of thoroughbreds how to go slow and pick their feet up. Taught a lot of quarter horses how to get fast and pick their feet up. Showed some USEF and USEA hunter shows when I was younger, and then I started in the stock horse industry and the American 4-H program around the time I was probably 10 years old. Rodeoed as well, all of my childhood. So if you ever want to go fast and turn around a can or rope a cow, I'm your man. I'm not sure that I'm great at it. I might be a little rusty, but I can help. But that's kind of my background getting into it. Like I say, I started showing around the time I was 10 years old. And then I did half a year as a non-professional, my first year as an adult, because I wasn't sure if I was going to go into the training side of things. And I showed that for about 6 months and then realized that it just wasn't worth it for me. And I needed to get into the training side of it because that's what I do love to do. I love building new teams and taking the younger horses and building them and teaching them life skills, so that I like to joke anybody's 80-year-old grandmother could get on them, but you can also ask them for more and go a little harder and a little more intense if you need to. That's always my big goal. I want them to be safe, but I want them to be strong as well. So that's kind of my background. When I started training professionally, I worked for CCC show horses. They were based out of northern Idaho for a long time before I met them. They actually moved down around the time I decided I was going to start training professionally it worked out great. I was their assistant for 8 years. I was taught a lot. I learned a lot about the reining, the cow horse, the ranch events there, because at that time I hadn't played in those pens yet. I'd done everything else. And then they gave me the opportunity to show some, prep some, do a lot of stuff. I've produced 3 AQHA World and Reserve World Champions in the performance halter, which were all halter bred, which stock horse halter. We always joke it's the hippopotamus class because stock horses are supposed to be huge, and that's what our breed industry standard is now. But I liked doing the halter horses like that were talented to ride and were very talented in their legs, but no one had given them a chance to do it yet because they had just been winning in the halter pen. So I did 3 of those. Each one of those I was able to get in the top 10 to top 5 range at the APHA and AQHA World Show in their performance events. And then they went on and won the halter as well. And then I've done a lot with the hunters. I've jump ridden a bunch. I do a lot of that now. I do kind of more like Krista does when she flies back to the States. I wait for one of my friends to call and say they need help. And then I say when, where, and tell me what I need to bring for clothing. So that's kind of how my background up to this point has worked. I've kind of slowed down. I'm not running 30 head down the road like we used to. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at there. So Maddie, do you want to jump to the next slide? Which is the one that I should have had you jump to before, but there's a very self-flattering photo of me and one of my favorite Western pleasure horses that I ever was able to own and breed, and she's a special one to me. That's Double Dark Chocolate. She's a multiple Register of Merit earning mare. She was just shy of her superior in the pleasure when I sold her, and I believe she finished that this year. It just isn't official yet. She's had 3 fillies thus far, 2 of which are out showing in the US doing things. If you want to jump to the next slide as well, Maddie, we'll kind of get to talking about my next favorite mare, Spot Ones Only. So this is a horse that really brought me into the industry and taught me how to bring a horse from the Western stock horse ideal to the hunter side of things. I got this mare, I believe 4.5 years ago or so. And she was a very touchy-feely, but very talented horse. She was already broke. She had a very good foundation on her, but no one had ever asked her to stretch her legs. They had taught her how to get round and collected, but they just all said she'd never do the hunter things. And the first day I rode her, I really felt like she could stretch those legs, stretch that back, stretch that neck, and get a little longer stride and still be able to suck back and do the other events, which she proved she did. She won the Pinto World Championship in 2023. She's an APHA top 5 World Show champion the last 5 years in a row. She actually won the world this year in the halter and has kind of gone on and done some other things. There's 3 babies on the ground out of her now because we've done some embryo transfer that are all kind of carrying on her legacy. And she's one that I like to show people how a Western horse can do the hunters and do it in a proper way, just like a hunter horse can shut down a little bit and do some Western events too. So if you want to jump to the next slide, we'll show that video and then the next video. Oh, that's a different horse. That is one that I also have, or I had in the past. There's my little trick pony. I used to joke with all my clients that I had at that time, if I can stand on their back and they'll lope around big and soft like that, then you should be able to sit down on them and do the same thing. And then I have a video of him as well, which should be the next slide, I believe. Of him showing in the hunter. Nope, that's Spot One's Only coming in next. So we're just a little bit out of order. Sorry, guys. But so this is the mare that won the jumping, the pleasure driving, which is a hunter event. She's been in the top 10 in the hunter under saddle. She's more than talented enough in the equitation. She just never had a rider for her, but she also could suck down and really get round and show in the pleasure. And this is something I like to show people because this horse is, I love her and I think she's a freak of nature and I think she's great because she can. But any horse can do that if you teach them how to be soft and round. And you teach them how to lift from the core. So Maddie, if you can jump, there we go, perfect. So that's the same horse. Now, neck up, strong top line, showing the working hunter. That was the year that I believe she was reserved that year in the working hunters. And in the stock horses, our hunter courses are set a hair lower. We don't set full 3'3" or whatever that meter is. I should have written that down, and I know that I should have, but I forgot to. Our hunter courses are set at 3 foot max, and that's where all of this is set. And this is the same horse that you just saw on a big old drape in a Western saddle, jogging along with a really long and low top line, going through the hunter course. And then if you want to jump down one more time, Maddie, I think there's another video of her showing the year that she won the Pinto World Championship in the over fences events. Yep, right there. Thank you. It's same thing there, like super happy. She loved her job and she still does to this day. She's great in this like more proper hunter type setting. But when her owner, and I should have grabbed a picture of her owner and her riding, and I apologize, I didn't do that. But her owner is never going to sit in an English saddle. That's where she was raised. She's very much old California cowboy. That was her whole family. And I can show that mare over the fences like that, big and strong and round in the hand and connected, and then put the owner on her later in that day, switch the tack out, and she will just be the same kind of round and connected later in the day with the Western bridle and everything. So Maddie, if you want to jump to the bridle connection one, there we go, perfect. So I have two pictures on this slide. The first picture is of a younger horse. He's 3 years old in this photo. We showed him in what is called the pleasure versatility class, where it's a lot to ask of a baby horse, and that's why there's not a whole lot of people that do it. We made sure he was strong enough and ready for it, but you can see the point of connection with the really long and round back on him there. And then on the photo below, that's an older horse kind of performing the same maneuver. I tried to find photos that were in the same spot, same lead, same everything. But we showed that younger horse, the roan horse, in the pleasure versatility class, which you have to lope over logs, trot over logs, walk over logs, side pass. You have to do a turn on the hind, both directions, back, walk, extend the trot, and then you have to perform 6 flying lead changes in that pattern. And the way I look at the connection of that horse, and it kind of brings me to my point of connection, if you look at the angle of the shoulder and the angle of the rein, that is where everything is coming from. Because if they're pushing from behind correctly, regardless of if you're going to do this, like that was one horse. The next day, I could have lifted that neck at that angle of the shoulder and come directly over a cross rail, and he never would have questioned it. And same with the horse below. I've actually jumped the horse below. I just don't have any video evidence because he was not the most talented fence horse, but he's great in the trail. But if you look at the roundness there, I really like to point that out to people that are starting to learn about the stock horse industry, because the round look and the roundness where they're driving from behind up into your hand, whether you're on contact like it is in the top photo or you're on a drape like you are in the bottom photo, that roundness comes from the center of the horse. So I like to think of it as picking up a tea bag with your thumb and forefinger and lifting it from the middle, which is what we do with our legs and our feet on these stock horses. We lift that rib cage and we create that build up from the base. So the horse in the snaffle there, we're helping more. Obviously, he's more immature, he's younger, he needs more help from the front to make sure that that lift is there. The horse in the bottom photo is a little bit older, a little bit stronger. He's had more time to build those back muscles, build those hind end muscles, and get used to that rib cage carriage. and lift up from the middle of the body so that it's easier for them to find those spots to get over a pole or to change leads correctly or to perform any maneuver correctly. Because if you're sitting up in a chair and you hollow your back, which I tell everyone this and everybody laughs at me for it, but it's one of my training tricks. If you're sitting up in a chair and you stick your nose out and you hollow your back out and rock your shoulders back really hard, for me at least, and most likely for most people, your back's going to kind of crack and you're going to feel a little wobbly. If you suck your belly button to your spine and then lift your shoulders up and look straight ahead of you, you're going to feel strong and confident. And that's what we're doing with these horses when we build that roundness. Maddie, if you want to go to the next slide, we can show that video there that kind of shows the anatomical version of it. And you can see in this slide, it doesn't necessarily mean, and I love the way this slide shows the point of contact from the mouth to the wither. It's not necessarily, we don't want their noses on the ground. You can teach one to reach down and really relax all their muscles, which I believe is really good, and then lift everything back together. I think stretching muscles is always important. It helps keep you from getting soft tissue damage. It helps a lot of those things. But if you watch this video, you can see the difference, and if you look really closely through the spine and through the neck. Because if you have one that's straight up out of their body, and every horse is different. Some are built more upright. Obviously, you would look at like an American saddlebred or a Tennessee walking horse. They're built very upright. Our stock horses are built a lot longer through the spine so that they can reach down and get round from their center. And a lot of people get worried about that because they think we're trying to just drive their necks down, and that's not the goal. Our goal is to stretch all those muscles out and build that rib cage so that we can create a lateral movement and we can create the muscles to lift everything together from the core. So like I say, going back to the tea bag, you lift it from your feet just like you would lift a tea bag with your pointer finger and your thumb and bring things together. Krista, do you want to jump in and say anything at this point before we go on to like top line way of going, understanding ideal stock horse movement?
I'll say anything you want. What do you want to talk about, Colton?
You can, whatever. I just wanted to check in with you and see if you had anything to add to what I've said, or.
No, I think it's great. I think, you're right. I think a lot of times, just talking to my lesson folks, a lot of people wonder why we want our horses' necks down. And I think when you are illustrating some of the anatomy and like how our horses' backs connect, and that, I think too, just because you see it in the show pen doesn't necessarily mean it's our ideal, right? Like if you've seen a TikTok video,
there's always going to be trends and fads, and that's in every industry of the horse side of things. There's always going to be an exotic one that comes in that sets the new standard that we all want to get to. And I think people strive for that in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gets people distracted from the base level, like anatomy, correct mechanics of how to work a horse.
I think that's what you're touching on that I find really important is it's making sure we're doing what's biomechanically correct for the horse. And then everything else is a bonus. And then a lot of that part really comes down to opinion, and understanding what our baseline goal is for these horses is probably the most important part. Let's get correct. And then we'll add all the fancy stuff on top of it. So, right, that drape, that's degree of difficulty. So it's most important that your horse is connected to that bridle correctly through the shoulder. And then we drape that rein out after that. And that's what adds some degree of difficulty to the maneuvers or makes you more eye appealing in the rail class, right?
Precisely. And that drape in the rein is which I'll talk about.
Yeah. I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
So, Maddie, could we jump to the top line slide, which is the next one after that? Thank you. So I always tell people, pardon me, you're going to get a very ugly view of my face so I can read this because I want to read it out loud and I want everyone to take this to heart. This is APHA, AQHA, and NSBA's example of, like, this is in the rule book what a proper lope for a Western horse should look like. And I feel like this is what a proper canter should look like also, because it's all the same mechanics. You're just either on a bigger horse or you're doing a bigger step. So a horse exhibiting an...
Could you quickly clarify, like, when you say canter, how is that different from lope?
So a lope is in a so if you're in the show pen, a lope is in a Western saddle, a canter is in an English saddle.
Right.
If you're out riding, a lope is, in theory, the slower maneuver, which is a lot of what some Western pleasure folks kind of get flack for and get in trouble for, because we do really try to get our horses as strong as we can through their body so they can really hold the ground, hold their legs, swing with a big, deep hock split, and throw that front leg out in front of them. It's almost like a ballerina on point. And I think a lot of people don't think about it that way, but that's truly what it is. We're building an 1,800-pound animal to be a ballerina. And that's what we look for in our Western events and our hunt seat events as well. But in the Western, it's really hard to get that pure, clean movement where they can balance on a toe, hold the ground, and step through and swing that front leg and that hock through. And it is a gorgeous thing to see. So back to what I was reading through, which I'm sure you've all read it, but a horse exhibiting an excellent lope rounds its back and has a strong, deep stride with a flat swing in the front legs, which is something that's a little different from what you see in the hunter pen a lot. You'll see a lot more knee action there. You'll see a lot more knee action with your eventers. Obviously, in the dressage, they love a high knee. They love that big knee action, but it's the same concept. We're just doing it asking for a flatter movement to cover more ground. And that's where my racetrack background kind of comes back to me, because I remember long ago, my great-granddad, before he passed away, rest his soul, told me the flatter your horse's legs are and the bigger he can swing, the faster he will run, because he's not taking extra time holding things in the air. And it works both directions. They can go faster because they're flatter, or they can hold the ground and hold the air better because they're flatter, because it's the same concept. They're not trying to create tension anywhere. They're just stepping through, landing, and stepping through. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about. But I think it's something that, regardless of what your background is or what you're kind of moving forward trying to do, is something that everyone should think about. Because unless you're looking for something that's a high stepper in the hock and the knee, I mean, if you want an Arab or a saddlebred, absolutely, you get those high knees, you get those big hocks. But if you want a horse to just cover ground in a soft manner, the flatter they move in the front and the deeper they swing from behind, the more ground they cover, either slow and soft or big and fast, regardless of what you're trying to do. And I think that's something that a lot of people look past. And it should look, as the rule says, it should look effortless. It should look soft. The hocks don't drift behind the tail. It should be a level top line, which we will talk about why it's down below and up above from time to time. But level is the goal. The main level point is the goal for all of our stock horses, because that's where, in theory, if they're bred for what they are, that's where their neck ties into their body. That's not saying if you have one that's built downhill that they're going to be a little lower, or built uphill that's going to be a little higher. But the level there and that self-carriage look where it just looks effortless all the time. Like, that's really what we're going for. And I love that Krista put the pleasure horse outline with a rainbow around it, because the rainbow is the best way to describe how you lift a horse from its core. You want that neck long and low and soft, that hock deep and low behind, and that rib cage and that spine up and round. And you can see in the next slide, if Maddie moves there we go. This is a picture of a horse that's cantering downhill. It's the same horse. On the front side, it's cantering downhill. On the next slide, it's cantering through the bridle with a flat top line. And you can see, if you look real close, where that leg lands in the front. The hock is about the same there because she's still driving this horse from behind. But in the top line, this horse is one that's built a little bit more upright. He's built a little bit more huntery. When you have that big long stretch, like this is what I tell people, like, and I still do, ride thoroughbreds off the track and build them into new careers. And I say this to people all the time. Sometimes if you get long and low to build those muscles and then lift them back up, you get this desired effect, which is what's being shown in this photo. That horse did not canter through the pasture with a 14-foot stride like it does there. That is because the rider that on that one, which Krista and I personally know, she's a very talented hunter rider, has taught that horse to be round and soft and then let him lift back up. And she's used the angle of the shoulder. You can see where the rein hangs, and it hangs right across the angle of the shoulder. That 45-degree angle means a lot. And a lot of people look past that because, in my experience, a lot of clinicians from the US and whatnot, they either pull down or they pull up, and they don't care where their horse's head is at, which I don't care where my horse's head is at, but I want to feel where their ribs and their hock are so that we can lift it from behind and roll it forward in an upward motion out of the front. So on to the next slide, which this is written as the way of going for an excellent trot defined by APHA, and this is also AQHA's excellent trot. The horse should seem effortless and efficient. I don't want to see a horse that sits there on the ground and does nothing, but I also don't want to see a horse that looks like they're going to pogo stick somebody off the saddle every step of the trot, which is why we go back to that roundness and that strong low top line. And you can see in the horse in the picture, this is a photo that AQHA uses in the States and everywhere to define what an excellent trot is. It's not that that horse is down in the dirt with his neck. It's that that horse is round through his rib cage and he's driving from underneath, and you can see where he reaches almost to the front of his front foot. He reaches through his shoulder with a flat, long step, which is what you want because that flat, long step covers ground. And same at the canter. If you get that knee in the air, that's where you're going to get in trouble, and you're going to run into trouble, especially if you want to go over fences or if you want to do anything to that route, because the more they crawl through the air, the less you're going to be able to control that stride and cover ground going into your fences and get the correct stride distance from fence to fence. And I keep bringing that up, but that my background mainly for the hunters, or mainly for the English horses, is the hunters. I'm very much in the hunter industry. I've played with the eventing and whatnot, and I have a basic understanding of it, and I've shown a couple like low-level eventers. But when I look at one that I want to put over a fence, or if I want to put it in the cart for the pleasure driving, I want to make sure that it wants to reach long and strong through that top line. And I like to say that instead of long and low, it's more long and strong. I want to see that back lift and that neck just hang there softly. So then you don't have to worry about what you have in their mouth, because a soft bridle is a soft bridle. You can have a spade bit or a snaffle on one, and you can still feel it in your fingertips if their back is strong and they're round through their body and their shoulders are lifted. And I think a lot of people that go into the stock horse industry want to just knock that neck down to start with. And that's not helpful for anyone, because then you're driving the front feet to the ground instead of lifting from behind, which you'll see in the next photo. Right there, which Krista has shown, I'm sure, to most of you. And if you watch her website, it's right there. But it's that engagement from the hind to the core upright. And I love the way that the arrows are drawn on it, because you should always, and I say this, and a lot of people don't understand, and please feel free to ask questions about it later. I like to say to everyone, and what my kind of goal is to drive the outside hind leg across and up so that that shoulder has a free swing to it and gets up and out of the way. Because if you drive that hind foot and you've got their ribs up and round, that shoulder is going to swing and you're not going to have to worry about your neck. Your neck and top line is always going to be right there if you have a good connection with your horse, if you ride off of your outside hind leg, especially at the canter. Because if you're driving from that corner, because at the canter, you're probably always going to be at roughly a 40 to 45 degree angle if you're on the correct lead or if you're asking for the off lead. So if you drive that spot, it pushes the rest of the body up and round and through that spot. So, Krista, do you want to jump in and say anything at this point?
No, I think you're doing great. Maybe would you clarify a little bit, like when you talk about the hunters, because I think hunters in the States looks a little different than it does here. Like, would you speak a little to what like the A circuit looks like in the US versus what the paint kind of hunter horse would look like, or what that type of showing might look like?
Absolutely. So, Maddie, could you jump back to the slide that's just the big canter where the horse has the big neck and the low neck?
This one?
Yes. So, your hunter under saddle horses in the US are going to look more like the neck on the front of the same horse. That is kind of where we've set our industry standard. It's the same we do with our Western horses. In theory, we want them level. Level is the goal. But the most unathletic thing you can ask a horse to do is lift its belly, drive from behind, stick its nose out, and hold its neck just above level. So that's where the Western industry has gotten themselves in trouble a few times. But they've also gotten better, and they've learned from that, because it's hard to do that. It is truly hard. Unless there is a freak of nature, it is hard to do that. So when you go on from that point, what I love to see in a hunter is something that if I can relax that neck and that back, and I can lift that back to relax that neck down, almost in a dressage type style of warm-up where they want everything to walk long and low and kind of reach down for the snaffle, that is what I love to feel, because you can always lift those shoulders up through your hands or through your feet or a combination of both. In the Western stuff, you're going to have more in your foot and a little bit less in your hand. Even though you've got more bridle on in the Western, you don't have any more bridle in your fingertip. And that's where you should be riding to. It's got to come from your leg and your body. And that's where I love to see one get long and low. And I love that this horse, I love the way this photo is done. That's why I asked this photo to be put on, because it's the same horse. And at that lower point, you can see it's stretched through its back. It's really working strong. The rest of its body has not changed, other than the rider lifted the neck just a little bit. And if I can find the video of this situation that we have posted, of this picture that we have posted here, I will tag it with Ireland Stock Horse, because I couldn't find it earlier, and that's my bad. But you can see the horse canter around with its neck lower, and then you can see it canter with its neck higher. And it's not that the neck was lifted, it's that she lifted at the angle of the shoulder to bring the front end up and out. And it's where that lateral movement comes in, which is our next point of talking, where you need to be able to move those rib cages and move those hips and move those shoulders around, because if you don't have that control, how are you going to teach one to change a lead, or teach one to stop, turn on the forehand for the equitation over fences, or go into the horsemanship and be able to two-track one-handed? I mean, even in the hunters, that's a required maneuver for our equitation in the stock breed. You have to be able to two-track one, or shoulder in or shoulder four. We require those maneuvers at the big shows. So if you don't have that lateral maneuver, where I think that's really what this photo is showing, is that she dropped that one's neck, but she kept that lateral through its body, which is what we'll talk about next. But when she lifted it up, it opened that shoulder up just a hair. And it's not that that horse's neck is low in either photo to me. Either one of those positions is acceptable to go show at any level you want it to do. But The difference there is that she came up with the angle of the shoulder in the front while driving that hawk exactly the same.
Well, and Colton, when you did the hunter circuit in the States, that's typically over fences and there are some flat classes. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I know for us, it's typically like you enter, you do your hunter pattern, you're placed. Like that's really all there is to it. Whereas I know it does look a little bit different here. And then on the paint and quarter side, I'd say most of our horses that are showing the over fences would also be doing the hunter under saddle, don't you think?
Yes. So for like the stock horse breeds in the States, if they're showing over fences, they're typically doing the hunter under saddle, the equitation, and possibly the pleasure driving, which is another whole beast that I'm happy to talk about at any given time. But they have to be able to get round and soft and lift through that shoulder, especially. And I look at this, anytime I start a horse, if it's going to ever be under saddle, I put them in a surf single and I drive them. And I drive them like they're going to be a driving horse from 1940. Like they're going to be or 1840. They're going to be the horse that you would want to carriage drive down the street. Because if you don't have that lift through the shoulder and that softness that they learn naturally to lift round and use their back, that's what gets you in trouble. And a lot of people don't think about that in the States and across the world. Pardon me.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good.
So, Maddie, do you want to move to the lateral situation? And we'll talk about that for a second. And I should have sent a video of a Western rider, and I didn't, so shame on me.
We can put it on our Facebook for you later.
Perfect. So I like to end everything, regardless of who I'm talking to, what they want to do. And like I said at the start, I have a background in racing, rodeo, proper hunters, eventers, and then in the stock horse industry for the longest time because I was the weird one in my family that wanted to go slow. But teaching a horse to reach long and low, kind of dressage style, like I want them to reach down for that snaffle. I always say the first 90 days of a horse's training should be the same regardless of what their job is. And I have lived by that rule my entire life, and it's saved me and a lot of my jockeys that have ridden our racehorses from a lot of wrecks. Because I do the same thing with everyone, and then I read the horse and see what they need more of. And a lot of the time, it's more time I'll put them in the driving lines and the harness, and I'll teach them to reach down and almost get a little bit rude low. If you're high and you're pulling on me, that's not okay. Because that's showing me you're hollowing out and not trying. If you're long and low and pulling on me, that means you're trying to figure out what muscle to flex to make it happen. And that's one thing that I really try to teach people, and I try to explain to people. It's not that the horse is being rude. They don't know at the baby stage, obviously. And you can do this with any stage of horse. I've done this with 10-year-old racehorses that came off the track that we x-rayed, and they were completely fine, so they needed a new job for the next 10 years and to have a new human. And I've done a lot of this. And if you teach a horse to reach long and low and then softly lift them up with the angle of that shoulder, and the angle of that shoulder is key for your lift, because you can lift straight up and out and not get anything accomplished. And you can pull right down to your ankles and not get anything accomplished because you're never going to build muscle that way. You have to come through the angle of the shoulder so that anatomically it makes sense. And it's that engagement of the core that is your big things. And I always say, it's one of those things that I fall back on constantly. I am a mechanic. I am not a mechanic with wheels. I'm a mechanic with hooves. So there's a lot of times I'll go out, if I'm riding a new horse or if I'm doing something, I will go out and tell myself, and I'll talk it out loud because that's what helps me as a trainer to do the best job that I can, because none of us are trying to do a bad job. But when we go out, like if you sit there and talk to yourself for a minute and say, today I'm just going to play mechanic. And I've done this at horse shows. I've done this at world shows. I've done this at home when I'm just ready to fight a 2-year-old that I just can't figure out why they're so grumpy. And I've done all the vet work and they're not sore and they're not anything. I just can't figure out why they're so frustrated. If I walk out and say, I'm going to play mechanic today, I'll pick a part of the body I want to move around. That might be the shoulder. That might be the neck. That might be the rib cage. That might be the hip. That might be part of all of it, and create a proper roundness depending on the horse's level. But if you walk into things thinking about that and they want to reach long and low and connect that way, and you can move parts of those bodies, it's amazing what you can get done. Because if you can't actively push your horse's hip or rib while you're walking, you're never going to get it at the trot. You're never going to get it at the canter or lope. And that's where it has to start. And there are days that I've walked out on more than one occasion and I walk a horse for a long time. And that's all I do is just move that body and just try to make sure I can wiggle those ribs and get that lateral movement. Because if you can't move laterally from the hip to the rib to the shoulder, you're never going to be able to step through and canter off or lope off in a correct manner, because you can kiss and hope and pray and pull their nose a little bit, which is what we do on the babies the first 2 rides. But if you don't have that and you don't have that button, how do you plan on getting that one shown is my question to everyone. And then I look back too as somebody that's done a lot in the Western riding event, which is 7 to 8 lead changes in every pattern. And it's on a drape, on a big old bridle, and hoping that your horse is with you. And that goes back to lifting them from the middle. But you also have to have that lateral maneuver available. Because if you don't have that lateral, you can't set one up to change leads correctly. And I've ridden some hunters and some eventers behind some other folks that I couldn't follow. I had to kind of take things back to the basic level and teach these basic things, because they taught theirs to change leads by just pulling a rein and praying. They never taught that lateral maneuver. And if you can move the rib cage at a walk, and I mean base level, walk a circle, softly hold the nose to the inside, tap that inside foot just a little bit, and keep your outside leg just there enough that they're not trying to run away from you. If you can't do that, then how do you ever expect to change a lead, pick up the correct lead, or be able to control your forward motion? Because when you get to your forward motion on them, if you're going from, let's say, a Western stock horse lope to a canter, I want to push that hind leg off the ground to build that lope or build that canter. That's how I like to do things, because then I feel like I'm driving them up to my hand into the bridle, into that soft connection through your hand, whether you're in a snaffle or a cathedral Western bridle. You can drive a horse right up to your hand if you have that connection through their body. And that's something that I think everyone could learn from. And I have a lot of friends in the States that do pre-St. George to Grand Prix level dressage that talk to me about this a lot, because they start theirs a little different and then they have to go back and fix these things. I start that from day one. If day one, all I do is walk on a horse, if I can walk and turn both ways softly, I'm good. And on day 5, if I can walk and turn both ways softly and just a little bit of pressure and move that rib cage over, we're good. And if you build that stuff from the very basis, and it's irregardless if it's a young horse, an older horse, a broke horse, these are things that you can use, that lateral maneuver is always going to come in handy. Krista, is there anything you want to add? I know I went on a full tangent there because that was my big tangent.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, I think something that's really big in our discipline is that forwards, backwards, left, and right. A lot of other disciplines really focus on that forwards and backwards part of their horse's adjustability. But for us, there is a lot of that left-right control, and then separating it into those different parts of the body, like the head and neck moves separate from the shoulder, moves separate from the rib cage, moves separate from the hip. And I think the only thing I'd add is that's really the basis to all of our maneuvers, right? When we're talking about prepping a horse for the equitation, and as we said, a lot of times it's the same horses that are in the equitation as are in the horsemanship, as are in the over fences half the time. And, you know, when you want to sit one down and ask their hind end to stay still and those shoulders to come around for your first haunch turn, I mean, if you don't have that lateral control to where your foot can come forward and push that shoulder over, then, you know, good luck in the full bridle one-handed. But that's kind of what you're asking for.
Well, it's just that same thing. I mean, when I start a colt, first day is walk, trot, lope, whoa, both directions, turn around, and back.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is the start to every animal that you should ever get on. And I don't care what their job is. And I feel like I have a unique experience there because I've dealt with racehorses. I've been in the rodeo circuit at the pro level. I mean, I've been to the NFR. I haven't competed, but I've been there with friends that I've started horses for. Like, and I've also been to the big level hunter shows, and I've been to the quarter paint and NSBA and all the world shows the last few years. But that first 90 days means a lot. And if your horse doesn't have that, that doesn't mean they can't learn it. But that basic walk, trot, canter, whoa, back, move your body parts is what comes down to creating anything and creating that strength through the body. And that reach long and low through the neck, you can always lift their neck up. You can't always put it down. And I think what you showed earlier, what we had in the slideshow with the structural point of a horse, the longer and lower you can stretch that neck, the more it will build the back muscles. You can always lift it back up and get it a little bit more round. Mm-hmm. But if you don't ever teach your horse to reach down and get soft and build those muscles, then you run into trouble later on because that's what creates a sway back. Or, I mean, it can create problems in all the joints. It can create arthritis in the stifles. Like, they have to have those muscles.
Yep, absolutely. No, you're 100% correct. And I think a lot of what you've pointed out today is what is truly the same across discipline, like what really applies to all the horses,
yes.
Versus it's like really, really, truly the only difference between bringing your horse into the hunter classes, the hunter under saddle versus the Western pleasure is forward momentum. I mean, there's really not a lot
else. The forward and the bridle. And it doesn't make a difference because you can do just as much damage with a rubber snaffle as you can with a vaquero spade.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that's what a lot of people don't think about, but I truly believe that. And that's from my great-grandpa and my grandpa and my mother and everybody down the line. It's not what's in their mouth. It's what you teach them to do with it. Because if you pull on them too hard in anything, something's going to happen. But if you have a little bit of feel and you think about lifting that horse from the center of their body, regardless of what their job is, I don't care if they're walking down the trail, but if you lift from the withers up, you're always going to have a solid horse.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love your quote here.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. Like, we're riding farm animals in circles. I mean, I've spewed for an hour now about the intricacies of, or the, words are escaping me, but the intricacies of it. But at the end of the day, we're riding farm animals in circles. Don't overthink it and have fun with your horses. But there's a lot to be said for getting on your horse one day and walking around and just seeing what body parts you can move with your feet and your hand. And just softly asking for it and see what you've got. And if it's not there, work on that at a walk for the day. Don't put yourself in a stress mode. Like, don't try to overthink it. Just, if you can't move your hip to the left while you're walking forward one day, maybe that's all you do. And if it takes 15 minutes, you have a 15-minute ride that day. And I treat my yearlings, my weanlings, my 4-year-olds, and my 12-year-olds, and my 20-year-olds the same way. If there's a day that they just don't want to play, but there's a little thing you can kind of feel doesn't feel right, just do that little thing and then go forward.
Yeah. No, that was great, Colton. Thank you so much for your time and expertise. It's a hard thing to ask horse trainers to be off horses, but we really appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and transition us now into our Q&A portion. So if we have any non-members present, you're still welcome to audit. We're just doing mics on for members only. And this is really supposed to be conversation style. Like, don't feel like you need to get your one question in with Coltin and then you're going to be cut off. Like, as long as everybody's getting some, a chance to share, we'll let you go ahead and keep chatting. And if you want to talk about your horse specifically, if you want to talk about your thoughts, if you just want to know more about Coltin, this is your moment. So again, thank you so much, Coltin. Really appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and have every member turn mics on now. Come on in, say hello when you're here.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Anyone want to say their name, introduce themselves?
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hey, I see Neve. I hear Neve.
Yeah. So I can hear Neve.
Coltin, you get bonus points if you can spell it.
Niamh.
You've seen it on my Facebook. You cheated.
Bullshit. I made it an hour before I cussed.
I get $10. Very good. All right. Did anybody have a question to get us started? Anything you're dying to ask Coltin? Jump in.
It can be anything too. Like, if you want to know who made my hat, I don't care.
I think Neve's ready.
Okay, go for it.
So I have my Grand Prix show jumper who I've retired from jumping now. I'm starting to do the hunter in her saddle and eck with him. And I'm very happy with how his trot is coming along and his canter is a work in progress. But I'm just wondering if you have any tips on how I can get him more consistent in the trots. Like, he really likes to come up in his neck and tense up and get really anxious. So if you have anything that can help with that would be great.
So I love to, when I have one like that, and I've had many like that, and I've, like I said earlier, I've had a lot of thoroughbreds that came off the track that are taught to be upright. I love to spend time and get as lateral as I can. And by that, I mean, I break that neck apart from the rest of the body. So I'll hold it to the right, and I will sit the trot, and I will trot for 20 minutes. And I'll hold it to the right for a few steps, hold it to the left, hold it to the right, hold it to the left. When they feel like they want to soften and reach down, which is something, I could tell you better in person, but when they feel like they're ready to almost, I hate to say it this way, but when they almost want to be rude and really reach down to the ground and really stretch their muscles, that's when I will really get back to them, and I'll give them 2 or 3 strides that way, and then I lift soft and hold them, and then I go right back to what I was doing to pull left, right, and at the same time, I'm going to be working my legs on their rib cage. So that goes back to that lateral conversation we were having. So I want to move that rib cage lateral to the right, lateral to the left, and do those things, because you can be trotting down the middle of the pen at a world show, and you can move your horse. If you get to the point, you can move that horse to the left, to the right, every other trot step. And I've had a few that I've had to show that way because they got stressed about it and they wanted to kind of crawl out of the bridle and get nervous. Excuse me.
You can take a drink of water. We won't make you talk the whole time.
Oh, pardon. But if you get that lateral connection, that's why that is so important, because there's a lot of horses, and I've jump rode a lot too, that if I can just wiggle left and right and I trot, it's almost not like you're trotting a straight line. You look in a straight line, but you're trotting left, right, left, right, left, right every step. It's going to help build those muscles, and then it gives them something else to think about, especially with the ones that want to overthink. So that's kind of how I'd address that. I would start with separating the neck and rib and hip from everything. If you're trotting around, hold that neck to the right, work that right leg and move that rib out away from it. And then I'd give back and I'd go to the left, and I would separate that neck from the body, work that left leg, move that rib the opposite way, and then be soft again. And that's a big, easy way to go through and kind of get one to settle into a trot. And then you get to the point, in theory, if everything goes right, you can softly move your fingers on the rein and work that neck back and forth, and you can use your feet just like you would if you were being really aggressive about it and really holding that neck around. And it'll give you the same effect once they get used to that. And it'll slow those legs down and slow that lift off the ground and that land. It'll create more of a correct trot instead of a spicy, we're jumping and extra spicy queso trot.
Perfect. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. All right. Who else? Someone in the hot seat. Jump on in.
Let's say anyone else. I am happy to answer anything.
Obviously, Colton hates talking, so it's really
Okay.
this is really a challenge for you. I know I'm asking a lot.
Do you have any tips for like anxiety in the rider? I was working with Krista the other day, and I think we sort of got to the basis of some of my issues, and I think I'm just getting super nervous and tensing up quite a lot. I've ridden English my whole life, and I've had a lot of horses with behavioral issues and issues with bolting and stuff like that, and I never really thought about it before in terms of making me anxious, but I think now I'm sort of getting to that point where I don't keep my own horses anymore, so I'm only riding at lessons, and it's getting a bit more nerve-wracking, I guess. So my body isn't as used to it, so I'm just tensing up quite a lot whenever I feel that bit of speed be introduced.
Makes sense. Best thing I can tell you is going back to my last slide. We're riding farm animals in circles. Don't put so much pressure on yourself, which I know is rich to say because we all do it. I mean, it's not that we don't do it, but I have caught myself in this situation a few times, especially when it's been at the major shows and I've been helping other people or whatever it may be, or it's a horse that I really think has a shot at it. The best thing you can do is get in the saddle, sit down, exhale, and like get yourself comfortable to where you truly feel comfortable, and then walk a little ways, trot a little ways. And then if you feel like you're tensing up, sit down in the saddle and roll your body. This goes back to what I started with earlier. If you will like sit down and it forces you to, I've learned this trick because believe me, I've been there. If you will roll your shoulders back over your hips, arch your back, and like put yourself in the most awful possible position you could be to go over a fence, because you would fall down, and then just take a big old deep breath and suck your belly button to your spine, close your shoulders, and then like almost, I call it mushrooming. You just like let your body collapse and then come back out of it and breathe and then walk off again. It has always helped me. And it's one of those little things you can do regardless of if you're at a show, if you're in the middle of a lesson, something like that. I'm a big proponent of music too when I ride. Like if I have the right kind of, like I'm a music junkie, so
Me too.
I am very much, yeah. So if I pick, like I put playlists to my horses. And that's one thing that has always helped me. And it's never, like it's not something anyone taught me, but I just realized if I knew, say I was riding whatever horse, if I listened to Lady Gaga or Sinead, like there was something there for that horse that made sense with that animal.
Yeah.
And so if you give yourself kind of that, like, if you're a more anxious person, don't do the pump up. Or even as you're driving to your lesson, don't do the pump up. Do the settle down. Like do the more classical stuff, or almost, like I hate to say it, but like sad songs or something to that effect. It's always helped me, and it's helped a lot of my clients. And then there's some that I'm like, okay, like let's listen to some hardcore Japanese pop right now and let's wake you up.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Actually, that could be really
Of course.
helpful for me.
Awesome. Anyone else?
No, I can hear you. Yeah, I have a question.
Come on in.
Okay, so, right, Krista, close your ears, okay? Okay, so we've got a paint horse coming from California. I think at the end of this incoming week. So,
Okay.
so she's only a baby. She's only a baby, really. So she needs to. Oh, sorry. I'm told she's 5. So
She's not a
if
baby.
we want to. She's a baby in Ireland, okay? Pipe down. She so if we wanted to say put more miles on, I mean, essentially, the movement and stuff that they're looking for in showing is very similar here. You know, the sort of the flat knee action and the big easy sweeping movements and stuff. But the
Right.
critical difference is, correct is correct. But the critical difference here is that their head carriage is much higher. And it doesn't look, it's more like of a dressage sort of head placement. So I'm just wondering, I mean, I'm not saying that it's even something that to be thought about, but would it be bad for that horse to learn two different ways of doing it, or is it not a good idea, or what?
Lucky for you, I know that horse, and I rode her all of the month of August.
Okay. Oh, super. Right. Okay. That's very helpful.
But I always look at things like you can teach a horse anything. That's why I put the video up of me standing on the one's back and then showing the hunter. And same with the one that did the pleasure as well as the jumping. You can teach a horse a million different things if the basics are there solid. And I know coming from Bobby Emmons, the basics are there and they are solid. I trust that woman with my life. I've ridden that horse. I know that. But the problem you'll run into if you go a little aggressive with it is that she's going to get confused. So you're going to have to go slow about it.
Yeah.
But there's no reason that you can't lift the angle of the shoulder as long as you're driving that hawk behind. It's just like the photo that Krista posted that she has on her website as well. If you drive that backwards gear, you can lift the front end up off the ground and round the neck a little bit softer. As long as you're holding and being productive about it and you're not just pulling your head straight in the air.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's doable. And then the big thing too with me when I'm trying to do stuff, because I've helped with some people that do the Appaloosas in the States and they do saddle seat riding like the saddlebreds, but also do the Western pleasure. So they make it a big difference. We put this saddle on and this bridle on for the day we're lifting them up. Yes. We put this saddle on and this bridle on for the normal days where they're a little bit longer and lower.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
yeah, okay. Well, it's good to know. It's something.
I don't think
that can maybe be worked on anyway.
Yeah, I don't think you're in a bad spot, but I would also say trust your horse trainer because she's handy, and I trust her implicitly. And like I said, I've ridden the mare. I know the mare very well. I know the program she came out of. I call Bobby my mother. She's my other mother. So I know she's super broke and she's ready for you. But just trust the program and make sure there's that difference in the situation because you don't want to confuse one. Like you can always lift them up and you'll see, I meant to mention earlier, but like you'll see me in the Western riding warm up where we do all the lead changes on a big drape. You'll see me out there holding them up more dressage style to lift that shoulder and get them up and off their front end. But I always drop it back down when I feel like they're there so they can go back to their happy place and relax, poke that nose out and just be there.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Very good. Thank you for that. All right. Who else has a question? You guys are throwing softballs. Ask him something really hard.
Right.
I have a question.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm curious about conformationally speaking, even within the Western disciplines, the horses are so different. A pleasure horse is so different from a reiner or a cutter. And I'm sure a lot of people on this call are familiar with like the sport horses, the cobs. What do you look for in the conformation of horses that you want to do? I mean, I'm sure it will differ in discipline, but what do you look for in their hocks, their shoulders, their backs? What screams to you that a horse is well built?
I typically go back to the AQHA old school rulebook of what an ideal quarter horse is supposed to be. Because regardless of if they're 17 hands or 14 hands, I mean, if they're 14 hand reiner or ranch rider, or if they're a pleasure horse that's 15-2, or a freak of nature like a certain Vino was that was 16-2, or a freaky tall 18 hand hunter, I still want a short back, low set hocks, good angles across the shoulder that match their shoulder through their pastern, shorter back. I think I said that already. And then solid long neck that ties in a way that lets them relax. I love to look at a horse just standing in their stall, and I tell people this all the time. Like after I've tried one or whatever, I want to see them unsaddled standing in their stall, and I want to see where their neck hangs. Because naturally, if they're put together right through their spine, hock, stifle, the whole 9 yards, if everything fits like it should, and a good rule of thumb, the back should be a third as long as the underline. So like a horse should be a trapezoid in theory. If you're cutting them off at the neck and just looking at their base body, a horse should be a trapezoid. The top should be 1/3, the bottom line should be 2/3. But I love to see where a neck will hang naturally on a horse that's just relaxed. They're always, I mean, obviously they're animals like we are. We all look, I've spooked a few times because I'm looking at an ice skating rink that children are falling in. But you're going to look at things and see that, but I want to see one just relaxed in its stall and just see where they hang their neck. Because if they hang it long and low or just kind of flat and droopy lipped and happy there, that's always going to be an easier horse to put in frame and teach to really flex those back muscles and build that core and build that drive from behind than if you have one that's always walking around kind of looking at the sky. There's always a place for those horses, don't get me wrong. But for what I do, for the most part, I like to have one. And same, it goes to the racehorses too. I don't want one that's neck comes straight out of its withers up high. It shouldn't be a 90-degree angle unless they're looking at something or spooking at something. Naturally, when they're just walking around, I want to see a really flat, relaxed top line, similar to the picture that we showed of Lainey with both of those. Obviously, the lower neck was a little bit more work on the bridle. It's a little bit broker horse. The other neck, I want to see that sitting in a stall. Like that's kind of what I look for. And then like I say, the 1/3 top line to 2/3 bottom line and the proper 45 in the shoulder, 45 in the pastern, a low set hock will always save you long term. Made that mistake myself a few times. That will save you from problems with their SIs. That will save you from problems in their stifles. Because if their hocks are set low and under them, similar to what like you would say, like an HF mobster, I don't know if anybody knows that, but a reiner type that's a little bit lower built, that'll save you in those situations because their bodies are built to handle the ground a little bit more and stay a little bit more round and under themselves.
Colton, what is a low set hock?
So I always, like, this goes back to the 4-H days and the judging days, and I still do this. So friendly situation, keep yourself a pen or a pencil. If you hold your pencil up to a horse, their wither and their point of hip should sit at the same spot. Now, if you drop that pencil, if you're looking at the ideal horse, that pencil should sit just above the point of elbow and right across the stifle. And then you should be able to drop it down to their knee and their hock in the same place. And a low set hock will help you long term because it doesn't put extra stress on the stifle. And that's where a lot of the reiner type, cutter types get in trouble because they get a great turnaround horse, which if you have one that is longer in the back end a little bit built downhill, they can roll across that front end real good. But then they end up having problems later on, just like we do as humans, with their arthritic issues because they've flexed those joints a little bit harder than they needed to originally.
Right. So that's good. Thank you. Just thank you for clarifying that.
Of course.
Okay, awesome. That was a great question. Who else has something to say? Priscilla, Anna Maria, Hazel, did you guys have anything you wanted to chime in with?
Hazel is always super quiet.
It's okay. You can whisper in Mom's ear, Hazel. I won't blame you.
No, you happy with it? Anything you want to ask about, Chief? No, she's been in shy mode.
That's all right. How about from you, Priscilla?
Well, I feel like mine was slightly covered with knaves because I had something like kind of similar. I don't have like my own horse, so it's kind of like a neighbor of ours I would like ride back and forth in the evenings, and it probably a little bit the same. She would be like quite tense with her head up, but like I'm just gonna apply that same like moving like the neck from side to side and pushing like the body parts around and see like play around with that a little bit.
Absolutely. Move the neck, go to the ribs, like everything you can do. And I don't mean to say that to say just start kicking. I mean that being pull a direction and soften it and do it the other way and do it at a trot for a while. And especially if you can sit the trot on that one, like do it for a walk. And then if you can do it at the trot, and you can do it at the canter as well once you have them going. And that a lot of times will show you how strong bodied that horse truly is. Because if you can kind of softly pull them, I don't mean to say off balance, but I don't know how else to describe it, but kind of pull them inside out of what you normally would, where you ride from your inside rein to your outside leg. If you can pull them the off way and let them kind of fall to the ground there, that'll kind of teach, I mean, just about anything to get a little bit softer and think about where
Yeah.
their feet are going and also hold themselves up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
Actually, I have a question actually now when I think back, if that's okay. You were
course.
saying, Colton, that you drive the horses first before you ride them at all.
Yes.
So how do you start that process of driving? Because here they do a little bit of driving first, but I'm very interested in that, in the sense of how that ties in to get a young horse going and that.
So typically I teach all of my, it's an ideal world and this is how I'm starting my babies. They learn how to be tied, groomed, all the things, and they learn how to be lunged both directions in a semi-polite manner. And then I try to get them a little bit more polite before I put the drive lines on. And then while I'm lunging, I'll start playing, like I'll throw saddle pads on them and walk them around. And then I'll put a surcingle or a saddle, depending on the horse and where they're at and what I have at my disposal. My surcingle got busted last spring and I haven't got it fixed yet.
Yeah.
But I'll put the surcingle and the drive and the saddle pad on, and I'll lunge them around for a couple of days, get them comfortable that way. And then I'll put what I call the drive lines, which are just long reins. Like I'll put like 2 lunge lines or whatever I have at my disposal at that time. And I typically let them lunge with a bridle of some sort in their mouth. So I have it's my favorite bit in the whole wide world. And it's a full cheek snaffle that's a solid rubber mouthpiece. And that's usually what I start everybody in. That or a snaffle, or depending on the horse. I mean, there's been some that are a little pushy that I've started in a soft, like copper twisted snaffle, but same thing, full cheek snaffle. And I send them around like I would if I was going to be lunging them with the drive lines on both sides of the surcingle.
Yes.
And then start softly tapping on their back end, like get them comfortable with that maneuver. And I try to teach all of mine, cluck means trot from the walk, kiss means lope, and it's kind of basics of things that can all change. But just so they know, when I make a noise and I kind of push forward a little bit and I step behind, that means go forward. And I teach them that, and then I teach them to stop. Obviously, I've taught them to stop on the lunge line as well. The word whoa to me means whoa. 4 feet in the ground, we do not move our feet. And so I'm very adamant about that because it saved my life and a few other friends of mine's lives a few times. So I'm very good about that, and I'll just teach them to walk and trot and canter around both directions, stop, back up just a couple steps, rein back, and then soft turn both ways. And I usually do this in a smaller pen if I can, like a 60-foot round pen if I can. If not, obviously I hang on for dear life and we make sure it all works and we find the corners when we need to. But that's kind of how I do my driving. And I like to do that for at least a week, if not longer, if I have time. Especially where I actually hitch horses to the carts as well. I like to put that basis ingrained in them because it makes it so much easier when you get on their back, because they learn to reach down and long and low, and they kind of learn, like I said, the whoa, the turn, everything, and you can teach a lot before you ever get on their back. Like I said, the cluck to trot, kiss to canter type thing. If they're very confident in that, by the time you get on them the first time, usually they kind of understand the gist of it. And it doesn't hurt to do this to older horses too. I've done it with some that I've gotten in training. The one that I stood up on his back, I put him in the drive lines the one day just to see what he'd do, just to kind of see where he was at and pull and push and do things in a different way than he'd been experiencing. And it has always helped me learn more about my horse. And I'm big on making a connection with the horses. Like, I'm not a trainer that runs through the barn and hopes and prays they're all happy. I like to make sure I understand them and I know what's going on.
Super, super. Thanks, Coltin.
Of course.
Yeah, that was great. We still have a bit more time, so if anybody wants to circle back, ask for more clarification, like now's the perfect time to do so. If you want to just, ask a friendly question, you're more than welcome to. I will encourage you guys again, if you want Coltin to kind of review some video for you of your horse, you can reach out to him on Facebook for some of those video lessons. That is an option to you. I think, Colton's a good friend of mine. He's more than happy to help anyone, but that's a great way to go about it. But yeah, anybody else want to circle back to anything, want more detail, want to ask Coltin something different, go for it.
I was just wondering, I don't know if this can really be put into words, but I've always been curious about when you're starting a horse, how you really put that, like, getting them to understand really your body, your seat aids, and that like leg, getting them to understand really moving their shoulders, moving their hips, stuff like that. How you go about those beginning stages.
A lot of that for me comes back to the drive time and teaching them to lunge to begin with. And I know it's foreign for that entire side of the world, this is going to be me sounding dumb, but I like to start mine between 2 and 3 years old, even if that just means 90 days that year and then they get turned back out and then they come back in when they're finished growing, unless there's a medical reason. And I do love to go through and I do x-rays on my babies. I want to know what their joints look like, if there's something that I need to avoid. But I spend a lot of time in that first 90 days, regardless if they're going to be a racehorse, a rodeo horse, a bucking bronco, a Western pleasure horse, or a hunter or an eventer. That first 90 days to me is a lot of, I want to be able to walk, trot, canter, stop, and back, both directions. And then I want to be able to start moving those body parts. So usually the first 60 days is walk, trot, canter, whoa, back.
Yeah.
Depending on how they're coming through. If they're a little bit quicker learner, we'll start working on some other stuff. But when I start to move those body parts, I think about it even from, past, like, obviously from ride 1, you're usually just kicking and pulling and hoping that we kind of get around and everything's fine. But about by ride 10, they've kind of figured out, or at least in my experience, like I say, I always do clock to trot, kiss to canter. So they figured out when I kiss to canter, that means move your feet into that gear. Mm-hmm. So then I'll start pulling my hand, I'll start working on the bridle a little bit. And if it's a rubber snaffle or whatever, or a side pull type hackamore situation, I'll start working my hands just a little bit up with the angle of that shoulder, because that's what gives you that lift off point. And so I'll start working on that, and I'll start making it a point that I'm not just flagging my legs to ask them to move forward. I want that left lead. So I'm going to push my right leg in, and I'm just going to start working that empty heel. I'm not going to put spurs on at that point, but that first couple days, I'll start working that heel on them and pushing them across and see if they'll give me a single step. And then I'll just let them walk forward a little ways, and then I'll ask for a single step again. And if they'll give me a couple steps, great. And that's kind of how I look at it, is a single step can be what sets you up to lope off.
Yeah.
Or to go on forward. It's those little things, and then give back. But don't let them run through the bridle in the process either. And I think a lot of people get in a bad spot with that. And I've followed some people on horses that have come into me that were older in training that let them get a little bit chargy, let them get a little bit pushy into their hand to the point that you feel like you're pulling for all you're worth just to hold them where they're at. So that's where I start working my hands back and forth, or I'll switch like out of the rubber snaffle into a plain snaffle or a copper twist or something, or even a little Western type correction bit situation to get them to soften up to my hand enough that I'm not getting my shoulders jerked out of socket. Because I hate to say it this way, but I've ridden enough racehorses and galloped enough and worked enough that my body cannot handle it anymore. Like, I can do about one of those a day that's just yanking me out of the saddle, and then my body physically won't allow me to do it more. So I've gone to not a bigger bridle, but just a different feel in their mouth. And same with the way I use my spurs. I'll start with a little tiny nubbin of an English spur. I have my custom set that Krista's seen. I should have put a picture of them on there. They're basically a 1/2 inch little ball of my English spur. It's really nothing. It's nothing my boot heel couldn't do, but I'll start there. And then same thing with my Western spurs. And I show a lot of people this all the time. I don't know if y'all have ever experienced this or whatnot, but I'll take my Western spurs if they're concerned about what I'm doing with one, and I'll rub that spur up and down their arm or up across their rib cage and let them feel what it feels like, because I'm not ever trying to hurt one. I'm not ever trying to scare one. I'm trying to help teach get off of this pressure and get soft.
Yeah.
Because the softer you are, the easier life is. So did that answer your question, or did I just go on a tangent that wasn't helpful?
No, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
That's very good. With our final few minutes, did you want to chime in at all, Allison? We've got some time if you wanted to jump in.
Oh, my questions were just they were all kind of brought up. It was kind of just, I'm in the position of having 2 going on 3-year-old, thoroughbred and a quarter horse, so it's going to be fun, a mare. And I'm my questions were going to be like, what kind of tips to give me to do all that, but you kind of covered that already. And I actually kind of agree with the whole spur thing. If you want, I have a pair in the back. They're safety spurs. They're exactly what you're talking about, if you want me to show. Because I've been practicing with those too. For the reason being, I'm not sure about requirements of shows and stuff, but if we are required to use spurs showing or, reining or bar race or whatever, we need to know how to use them. And a lot of us don't. And a lot of us don't want to use the pointy ones for the actual fact of we don't want to hurt the horses. But these safety spurs are pretty handy. It's literally just a little ball on the end. There's no point to it at all. They're really good. I suggest getting a pair if that's the case.
And there is no breed requirement for having to use a spur.
Okay.
It's just a part of what I've grown up with the community that I've been in. I mean, I have a lot of friends that their dads and grandfathers were old vaqueros from Mexico. I mean, I've seen the big, sharp, scary looking ones, and I've also seen them used, and I've never seen one of those boys ever hurt a horse with them because they know how to use them. And I think that's very wise of you to do it the way you're doing, because it's not going to hurt anything. And I'll go through and I'll, like with some of my babies, after I've driven for a while and then I put a saddle on, I will attach my spurs to my saddle and just let them trot around on the lunge line and let the spurs kind of flop on their sides with the stirrups.
Well, that's kind of one thing I'm doing is teaching her all the different movements, side pass and left and right and all that, but I'm using a spur to do it.
Yeah. And that's a great way to do it. And then I'll go through and then I'll do that. And then I'll go through kind of a desensitization. Like I will use foam noodles or whatever I can find, or a hula skirt. And then I just let it kind of rub, and we lunge around like we did when they were at the very beginning of life, and let them kind of desensitize to it, because I have always been the person, I would rather push a little bit more than hang on for dear life. And I really like to be able to ask for that little bit more. And I think a lot of that stuff, it's nothing that's harmful. And like I say, it's random. I mean, you can grab a tablecloth and strap it to the side of your saddle and lunge around for half an hour until they decide that it doesn't matter. And that's going to make them a better horse in the long term. Like I said at the beginning, my goal is to make a horse that anyone's 80-year-old grandmother can get on and go ride. Whether it's competitive or not, that is always my goal.
Yeah, well, hopefully she turns out like that. She's a Hancock, so we're hoping along that lines.
Oh, I've got one. You're fine. I've had a few of them.
That's very good. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to pull one more name for our second spot prize. Thank you for making it to the end. So, Priscilla, you are the owner of a brand new tail bag. Heyo.
Thank you.
This one actually comes from the Arizona Paint Horse Club, so we can all give them a follow on Facebook as a thank you.
Thank
And I'll
you.
get this one to you your next lesson. So very good job.
Yeah.
Okay, well, very good. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. I feel like this has been really productive for everyone. We're actually going to do our best to get this put up on YouTube. So if you ever want to come back and review it, if you have a friend that wanted to join and missed out, this will be here for your review. Don't forget to join us next month for Mark. And thank you so much, Colton. We really, really appreciate your time and making yourself available for this. So thank you again.
Of course, anytime. I am
Thank you.
happy to help.
All right, guys. Good night. Go ahead and kick yourselves off, and we are out of here.
Before
Thank
you
you,
go,
guys.
thank you, Colton, but thank you to you, Krista, too, because you organized it all.
Yes.
Oh, me and the team. Me and the
Krista
team.
worked far harder than I did. I got dressed and talked. She did everything. Her and Maddie got this all put together.
I was gonna say I just call people. That's all I do. That's my one job.
Well, you're
No.
great. Thank you very much, ladies. And
You're
Colton.
very welcome.
Thank you.
Right.